Bad news in the headlines this morning. Republicans did not do well in the off-year elections. Given that a lot of people told exit pollers they didn't like the health care plan, and you go into tax reform with it polling less than 50%, do the elections change your strategy at all?
Not at all. I'm not concerned about that. I think there is very big support for middle-income tax cuts, which is a big part of the focus of the president, and making our business tax system competitive with the rest of the world. That's what this is all about.
The Senate is apparently considering a one-year delay implementing corporate tax cuts in order to make the budget math work. Is that acceptable to the administration?
Our strong preference is that the corporate tax rate starts next year. The longer we wait, the worse it is for the economy and making companies competitive. And we look forward to working with the Senate as the details come out.
But you don't rule it out?
Again, I'd just say the president's strong preference, he feels very strongly he wants to start this right away. But having said that, we'll have to look at the entire Senate package. I assume it's really just a money issue as to how they're moving the different pieces around. So it's not a philosophical issue. I'm sure that they'd like to start this as soon as they can.
Speaking of the money issue, the Ways and Means Committee in its markup yesterday gutted the excise tax provision, makes another $74 billion hole in the package. How do you feel that?
Again, I think we're going through a very healthy process, which we started getting the House and the Senate and the administration on the same page. So the fundamental goals and the fundamental parts of the bill we've all agreed to. And now we're going through, they're going through a very detailed process. You're talking about very technical issues on everything from the international side to pass-throughs and everything else. I think we're going through a very healthy process with the committees.
One of the things that's being talked about to fill that hole and others is to kill the individual mandate from Obamacare. Does the administration want that brought into the tax debate?
So the president would like that. That's something he's encouraged them to look at. I was at a press conference yesterday at the Senate. Senator Cruz gave a very compelling pitch for that. But we'll see. That'll be one of the things that's obviously talked about and will be considered.
When you do the math on who would vote for the package, does it concern you that Obamacare could complicate things in the Senate?
Again, to me, it's two different issues, but I think the appeal of putting that in is, one, it gets rid of a very unfair tax, particularly on people who can't afford it, and it frees up a lot of money that would go to a middle-income tax cut. But having said that, kind of whether that's included or that's not included, we are determined to make sure we get the tax cuts passed.
SALT, state and local tax deductions, in the Senate bill, they're talking about getting rid of it entirely. Is that acceptable to the administration, or do you think that you end up with a bill that can't get enough Republican support?
Again, I think fundamentally we agree with the idea of getting the federal government out of the business of subsidizing the states. That makes a lot of sense. Having said that, several of these states are a very big part of the economy: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, and we're sensitive to the impact on on those states. So I think that's something we'll continue to work with the House and Senate and look for the right solution. We want to make sure that middle-income people in those states also get tax cuts, and that's what the House bill allows.
The president campaigned against carried interest. Does the gimmick of having people hold it for 3 years satisfy the president's promises?
Well, the president very specifically campaigned against carried interest for hedge funds and for that industry. That's really what he's focused on. I think the House's move from 2 years to 3 years is absolutely a step in the right direction. And, as we progress through this process, we'll review, obviously, all these details with the president.
Muni bond experts say that the ban on private activity bonds would do a lot more damage to their industry than people realize, eliminating maybe 30 to 40% of the muni bond industry. And that would make it hard for localities and states to improve infrastructure, improve their local economies. Did you realize it would have that effect, and is that all right?
Well, again, these are details that are going through the committee process. When we established the framework, one of the things we felt very strongly about was that cities and states could borrow on a tax-exempt basis. We felt that was very important, and that's what's been protected in the bill.
Independent analysis of the House bill, many of them now, including the Joint Committee on Taxation, say you give middle-class families a tax break, but then for a lot of people it goes away when many of those provisions sunset. How do you reconcile that to the base, to the voters?
I mean, I think our expectation is that a lot of the things that are sunsetting, that's really just a function of getting the bill within the $1.5 trillion. Our expectation is a lot of those things would be renewed by Congress down the road. So I think we really look at it as we're really focused on what gets the most money to the middle income now, and that's really the focus of this.
Senate is talking about keeping the estate tax, dropping the repeal out of the bill. Given that it affects so few people, does it really matter to the administration whether it's in or out?
Well, I think, again, this is something fundamentally, the death tax, the estate tax, you're taxing people twice. They've already paid taxes, so this is a philosophical issue for Republicans.
Except on the capital gains from securities that are held in these portfolios.
Well, that's a different issue with the step up and everything else. But again, these are details. The president would like to have it repealed, but these are details as we go through and we look at the entire package, we'll review.
We're talking with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin on Bloomberg Television and Radio worldwide and on the Bloomberg terminal. Let me shift gears a little bit from taxes, talk about trade. The president's in China talking about trade. The dollar has been strengthening recently. A stronger dollar tends to raise the trade deficit. So does a strong dollar policy work against the Trump trade agenda?
As a general matter, I don't comment.
You're the only one that's allowed to. So.
Yes, as a general matter, I don't comment on where the dollar is in the short term. What I would say is part of the dollar's strength is obviously a function of the U.S. economy, how people perceive the U.S. economy, which is very strong, potentially U.S. interest rates relative to the rest of the world. So the dollar has appreciated over time, which has been very important. Having said that, there are short-term concerns about trade. The president's main focus right now is that we get free and fair and reciprocal trade. And a big part of his conversation in China and other parts of the trip will be making sure that we have fair, reciprocal, two-way trade and deal with the trade deficits. That's his focus.
Federal Reserve, you've got 3 governorships to fill. Can you tell me a little about the process, the timing, and what you're looking for?
Well, our focus was obviously on the Fed chair. That was an extensive process that the president was extremely involved in, all aspects of that. Now that we have that done, we're turning our attention to the other positions, and we look forward to filling them. So it'll be as well a very robust process of considering people and interviewing people for them. They're very important jobs to fill.
Are you looking for a PhD economist for vice chair to sort of complement Jay Powell?
I wouldn't describe there's a specific criteria. There's a lot of things that we look at, but the vice chair is a very important position, and that's something we're already considering people for.
Has Janet Yellen indicated to you whether she would stay on as a governor, which she can do after she's no longer chair, or could we face a Federal Reserve with only 3 governors?
Well, I had the pleasure of having breakfast with her this morning. We meet on a weekly basis. I don't think she's made any decision in regards to that one way or another yet.
What happens if we end up with only 3 on the Fed board? I mean, the administration has made a virtue out of the fact that a lot of positions aren't filled. Would you look at it that way?
I think our priority is we're going to fill these positions quickly. Our focus was on the chair, and as I said, now that we've resolved that issue, we're already looking at people for these positions. So I'm comfortable we will have the jobs filled.
Debt ceiling. In its latest refunding, your Treasury Office of Finance said that you can pay the government's bills through January. Is that the X date?
No, it's not. What we've said is we can at least pay their bills through January. We felt it was important to make sure that we set guidance that in the event a deal wasn't reached by December 8th, that we had the ability to get through the beginning of next year. There's obviously a lot of assumptions that go into tax collection spending and everything else, but hopefully we'll get it raised in December. But if we don't, we'll give additional guidance then.
You were in Saudi Arabia just before the Crown Prince moved. Did you deliver any message to him suggesting the administration would be in favor of it or would offer its support?
In regards to what issues?
In regard to the arrests that he's made and the corruption crackdown that he's instituted.
We had a lot of discussions on terrorist financing. We opened the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center together. We had a lot of focus on Iran. We didn't have any specific conversations on corruption.
So the Treasury Secretary was not carrying a message from the president on that?
I was not.
Does Prince Alawid's arrest pose any concerns for you or for American companies in which he has a large financial interest? He owns, obviously, financial stocks. Is this a concern for you?
I'm not going to make any specific comments on that. We look forward to working with the Saudis as they deal with these corruption issues and have committed to a fair process. So we look forward to working with them on the details.
I have to go back to taxes for one last question. Before he left for Asia, the president said, if anything goes wrong, I'm going to blame Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, and believe me, they'll hear from me. Has the president called you at all?
I've spoken to the president already several times. He's very involved, and Gary and I are very comfortable being accountable. This is the president's most important domestic agenda item, and we're going to get this passed.
When are you going to get it passed?
The objective is to get it to the president's desk in December to sign.
Why do we need to do it by the end of the year?
We need economic growth. That's what's critical. We need to continue to have sustained economic growth, and the tax package is a major part of that. So we want to make sure that we get this passed, that companies can make decisions, that middle-income people can see cash in their pockets, and we can see the economy continue to do better.